Hello everybody, Lisa here and welcome back to my channel. Today's Self-Worth Saturday topic is going to be a doozy. We are going to be talking about gaslighting. Now, this is a big topic, it's heavy, it's also deeply personal to me, so I wanted to start off with a few things just to sort of lay the foundation and the sort of groundwork for what we're going to be doing in this discussion. So first off, I'm going to share with you the definition of the term triggered from Wikipedia. A trauma trigger is a psychological stimulus that prompts recall of a previous traumatic experience. The stimulus itself need not be frightening or traumatic and may be only indirectly or superficially reminiscent of an earlier traumatic incident, such as a scent or a piece of clothing. Here's where I'm going to insert a trigger warning. Now, I don't do this in every single video because I do trust that people are going to do what's best for them and engage in the ways that are best for them. But I'm going to be discussing emotional abuse, psychological abuse, narcissistic behavior, and related topics. And I'm reading this so that I don't mess it up. If you think you might be triggered by any of these topics, please practice some very powerful, badass self-care and stop watching. With that said, please understand that this is a vulnerable topic, as I've already mentioned, so I'm going to do my best, but I'm using a lot of notes so that I can stay on track. This video might also go a little longer than my usual ones, and if I run over a little bit, don't worry. If you're watching this when it premieres, we're still going to have our live chat after, usually a quick 5 to 10 minute beverage refill break in between, and then we'll get started. So I also want to use the Wikipedia definition of gaslighting, just to frame the discussion. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation that seeks to sow seeds of doubt in a targeted individual or in members of a targeted group, making them question their own memory, perception, and sanity. Using persistent denial, misdirection, contradiction, and lying, it attempts to destabilize the victim and delegitimize the victim's belief. Instances may range from the denial by an abuser that previous abusive incidents ever occurred, up to the staging of bizarre events by the abuser with the intention of disorienting the victim. This term originated from the 1938 Patrick Hamilton play Gaslight and its 1940 and 1944 film adaptations, in which the gas-fueled lights in a character's home are dimmed when he turns the attic lights brighter while he searches it at night. He persuades his wife that she is imagining the change. The term has been used in clinical and research literature as well as in political commentary. Now, for this discussion, we're definitely framing this in the personal way. So some disclaimers so that you know where I'm coming from. I have been actually triggered, by the proper use of the word, by people using this term without fully understanding what it means, having had lived experience, or some sort of credible book learning on this topic. Gaslighting itself is a form of psychological abuse, and it is extremely damaging. Applying it casually to just any situation where somebody is exhibiting maybe not entirely honest or garden variety manipulative behavior diminishes the true meaning, and it also minimizes the experiences of those who have been subject to gaslighting. For this same reason, I really abhor using the word trigger in that casual, everyday kind of way, because to me, a trigger is a trauma trigger, as I defined at the beginning of this video. I have been triggered, and when I am triggered, I have flashbacks to moments of abuse in my past. That said, I just want to clarify that being offended is not the same thing as being triggered. With definitions aside, let's talk about basically what gaslighting is. And let me get a sip of water. I should clarify. So, gaslighting is when somebody manipulates your memory or your perception by trying to convince you that what you remember or what your experience is basically flatly incorrect. Somebody is trying to convince you that what happened didn't happen, or what didn't happen did happen. It's an attempt to maintain or gain power over you or over a situation. It is often extremely intentional, but not always. Sometimes it can be a coping mechanism of the person who's doing it, and not necessarily always malicious. That doesn't make it any less damaging. For example, when I have my memory challenged, even by somebody I love and trust, like my amazing wife, which you have all seen on my channel, I can get really freaked out because my memory was challenged growing up in a gaslighting kind of way. But when my memory is challenged, sometimes I can end up being so defensive that I end up trying to convince Peggy that her perception or her awareness of how a situation went down didn't happen that way. Before, and this is the important caveat, before I've taken the time to really think about what happened, to calm myself down and review the situation, and that can be a form of unintentional gaslighting. Calling myself out a little bit, but there's some things here that I deal with day to day that are very real for me and that do have ramifications, but that doesn't mean that I'm maliciously trying to gaslight somebody. And in that case, we can have open conversation about it and she can go, hey, let's talk about this. That's part of what makes it different. But I do think it's worth pointing out that sometimes this behavior can happen and there's a reasonable explanation based on that person's past, based on things you know. The most important key here is that we can talk about it and we can have that open conversation, and I don't hold on to that you're wrong no matter what. I hope that made sense. Nuance. Just like with anything else, there's a ton of nuance. Is this person that you're dealing with just panicking and unwilling to consider another perspective? Have they made a mistake and are just remembering something wrong and like maybe over defending? This is kind of where I can slot into. Or are they actually trying to control you? And that can really be the big difference. If you're dealing with somebody who is already very controlling and they're exhibiting this behavior, chances are that's straight up gaslighting and it's not good times. Like if you can't talk to them about it, if you can't have an open conversation of, hey, you're making me feel kind of crazy, that's a problem. So who would do such a thing as gaslight in that abusive, manipulative, controlling way? Abusers, sociopaths, narcissists. Gaslighting is actually one of the trademark behaviors of people with narcissistic personality disorder. And here's another disclaimer. Please remember that when I am talking about narcissists pretty much anytime ever, like ever, I'm not talking about somebody who's conceited and likes to look at themselves. I get that that's where that term originated, and there is a form of the word narcissist that's used in common vernacular that just means somebody who's kind of full of themselves. When I'm using that term, I'm referring to people that display all the characteristics or most of the characteristics of somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. Gaslighting is an abusive behavior, period. Whether it's intentional or not, or malicious or not, the behavior itself is still abusive and is still something that needs to either stop, be addressed, be discussed, changed, altered, etc. Like, it's not okay. Okay. How do you know if you're being gaslit? I'm going to hit you with a bunch of stuff. So first off, the person in question regularly tells blatant lies. If you find yourself constantly thinking, that's a lie, like, oh my God, you're lying to me right now. If you're thinking that regularly over and over, that's worth looking at. They deny things that they've said or done, even obvious things that they couldn't possibly have forgotten about. This is a big one. So somebody hits you in the face. This is a really obvious example, and I know it's triggery, and I'm sorry, but I need to make a point. If somebody hits you in the face and then says, what are you talking about? When you're like, why the hell did you hit me in the face? That's gaslighting. It's so obvious that what they just said is a blatant lie. Okay, I'm keeping it together pretty good. Next, they know what buttons to push. Chances are pretty good that if somebody is gaslighting you, they're also emotionally abusive in other ways. But one of the things that ties into this kind of behavior is they know exactly what words to use, what emotional triggers or strings to pull on. If you deeply care about your children, or if you have a really close friend or a pet that you care about, that can be used as sort of emotional ammunition when they're trying to make a point. Like, it's really hard to describe. I'm going to give you some very real life examples. So like I said, this whole video is a walking, talking trigger warning, but just they know how to push your buttons. And you should know what I mean when I say that if you're in this situation. You find yourself doubting your own memory or your own sanity, probably regularly. This person is so believable when they explain just how wrong your memory or your perception is that you find yourself doubting yourself constantly. There's a reason why, even now, 20 years later, I still doubt my memory. I still have trouble trusting myself and my own perceptions. They shower you with affection, make grandiose gestures, or other positive attention in between these episodes. So it's rare in my personal experience that an abuser always looks like an abuser. A lot of times somebody who is hurting you, whether psychologically or otherwise, regularly, is also peppering in these wonderful moments, big lavish gifts, or like effusive words of love and praise, and you never really fully know where you stand. But what that also does is it makes you doubt your perception of them as an abuser. If somebody is treating you like crap one day and then being extra awesome the next day, a common coping mechanism is to focus on the good stuff and kind of parse out the bad stuff and tell yourself, well, it's okay because, or clearly they love me because look what they just did. I know that one real well. They look at you as if you're crazy when you stand by what you know is true or your memory, and sometimes they even tell you you're crazy or you need help. Oh, I know that one real well. You apologize constantly. Oddly, the other person never does. There's always a reason things circle back to being your fault. Now, in this particular context, usually what's happening is that things are constantly being twisted so that you're ultimately to blame for everything. But and I want to say this right, if you stop and think about it, you can tell when things are being twisted around versus when you're having an honest discussion with your partner about baggage. Peggy and I regularly have discussions about my baggage and my trauma triggers and how those things show up in our relationship. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that fall into the it's not my fault, but it is my problem category when it comes to how we relate to each other. There's a lot of things that I have to work a lot harder at in order to relate in a healthy way with her that other people probably don't have to do. But that doesn't mean that when Peggy responds in a way that she shouldn't have, that she's not able to say, yeah, I could have handled that better. Let's talk about this thing. If the other person never has a reason they're to blame for anything ever, no matter what, that's a problem because everybody makes mistakes. And if the other person can't admit that they ever make a mistake, or if there's always a reason, or if there's always something you don't remember happening but they do, as to why that mistake happened or why that miscommunication happened, that's worth looking at. You never feel good enough with this person, or maybe even in general. One thing we don't talk about a lot is how emotional abuse affects how you feel everywhere, not just in that relationship or in that situation. Whew, that's a biggie. So if you find yourself constantly feeling self-doubt, constantly self-blaming, constantly feeling like you can't trust yourself, trust your memory, trust your perceptions, that's worth looking at. You feel weak, disempowered, and dependent. I love leaning on Peggy, but I know the difference now between feeling comfortable and loving and needing her in that way to feeling dependent and like I couldn't survive on my own, and I was raised to feel like I needed to be sheltered and protected in really toxic ways. You are constantly feeling off guard, on edge, hypersensitive, and as if you might be going crazy. I cannot stress this enough. You sometimes aren't sure about what you think, you aren't sure about what you remember, and you are afraid to have opinions on anything pretty much ever. So I'm about to tell a couple very personal examples of how I've experienced gaslighting. And in case there's any doubt to anybody just watching this, I'm talking about my mom. This is not news to some of you who've been watching Self-Worth Saturday, but I'm about to get real direct with this. So one example. My mom would be screaming at me at the top of her lungs, saying horrible things. But if I so much as said one word back or even looked like I was about to stand up for myself, she would suddenly stop, look right at me. Her face would twist up as if she was like looking at me like there was something wrong with me. And she would literally say stuff like, you need help, like super calmly, out of the clear blue sky. Another example. Mom might be being particularly vicious to, this actually happened. I shouldn't say would be. This happened. Mom was being particularly vicious to my little sister. And I was trying to sit her down and calm her down. And I was basically explaining to her that what my little sister needed was support and help and not to be attacked. And so she said back as loudly as she could so that my little sister, who was away at the other end of the house in her bedroom, would hear. So this was very intentional. What do you mean she needs mental help? You think she's crazy? And the big one. This is the one memory I'm about to tell you. I can do this. I do think it's important. I think it's important to have these conversations and to share these examples so that you know how damaging this stuff can be, and so that if you're in this situation, you get yourself the hell out. And we'll be talking about that in a minute. So this example is the one that I always return to when, even now, 20-ish years later, I doubt the experiences I had as a child. This one time, so my dad was an alcoholic, and my mom and him were constantly in these toxic push-pull, back-forth arguments, horribleness, bad stuff. One night he'd been drinking. He was just on the couch drinking a beer and watching a football game. Like, it was actually a pretty typical middle America kind of scene. Mom comes out of the bedroom and she's staggering and she's slurring. And Mom doesn't really drink that much. Whatever. She was way out of it. I was about 12, maybe 13, possibly a little older, but that's the age I remember myself being. So I was young enough to be freaked the hell out. And there'd been stuff leading up to this. Like, Mom had already tried to get him to stop drinking. She'd already tried picking a fight. It wasn't working. And she comes out staggering. And I'm like, Mom, what's wrong? And she was ignoring my dad. I was like, Mom, what's wrong? And she's like, I just took like 2 bottles of pain medication, or whatever number she told me, maybe a full bottle. I don't know. I just took a full bottle of pain medication. And then she started talking about how she wasn't going to be awake or alive in the morning. I'm, of course, instantly frightened. She sits me down at the kitchen counter and she starts taking off her jewelry. And she's like, here, I want you to have these. I want you to have these. And she's trying to give me her jewelry because I'm not going to be here tomorrow. And I'm bawling. I'm so upset. I think my mom is trying to commit suicide and I'm freaked the hell out and I don't know what to do. And I'm 11 or 12. My dad's on the couch going, well, whatever. Like, he's just blowing it off probably because he knows. I don't know. So I'm freaked out. I'm begging my mom to drink milk because I remember in high school being taught something about poisoning and if you drink milk, it's good, or so. I couldn't think of what to do. And I threatened to leave. I said I was going to get on my bike and I was going to go get help. I literally did leave the house, get on my bike, because she wouldn't let me use the phone. I would try to use the phone and she would take it out of my hands. I needed to get help because I thought my mom was going to die. So I get on my bicycle. I'm getting ready to run away, like to drive away somewhere. I didn't know where. It was the middle of the night or late at night. And she calls me back, I'll drink the milk, I'll drink the milk. For some reason that makes me feel better and I come back inside. But as soon as she's distracted arguing with my dad, I sneak into a back bedroom, I get a phone, and I call the apartment where my sister is living. This one's tough. But I think it's important. So I call my sister's place, I get her roommate, and I'm telling them what's going on. They must have called the police or emergency services or something. The police show up. Maybe 20 minutes later. Mom didn't know I'd called. She was distracted with Dad. So the police show up. And they do the thing that police do whenever there's a potentially domestic incident, I guess, is they separated all of us. So one police officer pulls me aside, and I'm like, she took all these pills. She says she's going to die. Like, I'm really freaked out. She needs help. Blah, blah, blah. They talked to my dad. I don't know what he said. And then my mom went with a different officer back into the master bedroom. When she comes out, I'd already talked to the one officer. When she comes out, she's talking normally. She's walking normally. She's like, I don't know what she's talking about. Like, here's my pills. You can see how many are left. I've only had the one that I'm supposed to take at X time. I'm totally fine. I have no idea what she's talking about. My mother gaslit me, faked her own attempted suicide, and looked me in the eye in front of police officers and was like, she's making it up. And later, I was so upset because this was the most obvious example of like intentional gaslighting, and I didn't even know that term at the time. I didn't know it till many, 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 many years later. But I remember just being so hurt and so angry and having no idea what to do with those emotions. I wrote a letter to her saying how upset I was, and I hid it in a drawer that she would find someday because she's a clutter hound. Maybe 6 months later, she finds this note and she calls me into her room. And she's like, how dare you judge me? I was in such a dark place. How do you know I wasn't really trying to commit suicide? So that's gaslighting. That's all gaslighting. That's like, and this is duress, by the way. I know I'm like doing this like awkward smile laugh thing. I'm sorry. It's an intense topic. But the reason I'm sharing it with you is because it's important. Sometimes we throw this term around. We throw the term narcissist around. We throw the term gaslighting around. And it's upsetting because this is big and it's real and it's damaging and it's abusive and it's horrible. And the ways that it makes you doubt yourself when it's pervasive and consistent is really hard to describe. So, based on everything I've shared, let's say you're watching this video and you're like, oh my God, like I'm in a situation and I feel like I'm being gaslit. What do? Number one, get the fuck out of that situation. That relationship, period, full stop. You cannot fix people. That is not your job. Even like maybe if it's your actual job, like you are a therapist or you are a counselor or you are a psychologist or a psychiatrist, maybe it's your job there, but not in your personal life. It is not your job. Your job is not to fix it, to piece it apart, to work it out. Get the fuck out. Now, that's not always realistic or practical. I was 12. What the fuck was I going to do? Sorry, I'm swearing a lot, but I'm really worked up. So, if you're not ready to get yourself out or you can't get yourself out, then what? Seek the support of a mental health professional, a counselor, or a trusted friend so that you can get some outside perspective on your situation and how you're feeling. The most validating thing somebody who's in this situation can experience is somebody believing them when they say this is happening. Even people that knew me, sorry. You guys, even my closest friends couldn't see this. They thought they saw it, they thought they got it, but they didn't get it. And some of them still don't, and they think they do, and I love them for that. But being believed is so important that if you're in this situation, I'm not going to edit this out. The most powerful thing you can do for yourself is talk to somebody who will give you perspective, who can believe you. And if that may not be somebody in your personal life, it wasn't for me. Oddly, actually, the first person that believed me was an English teacher in high school who I started to confide in. And that person probably to some degree saved my life. I still remember his name. Seek support. Support is so important. And I'm going to say this again at the end of this video, but there will be one link at the bottom of this video in the description box, and it is a worldwide link to all the domestic violence hotlines everywhere. So you can find the one in your area. If you are in this situation, reach out, get help. If you're not ready to talk to anybody, then at the very least, chronicle your experiences, record something or write something and then burn it. Anything you can do to validate your own experiences until you're ready to take that next step. But I strongly encourage you to seek support if you are ever in this situation, particularly if you're an adult and have the ability to get those resources for yourself. Okay, this got really heavy and I knew it was going to. No challenge this week and no journal prompts this week. The reality is that I am hoping desperately that every single person who is watching this video right now has never had to experience this, and therefore there wouldn't be any journal prompts to explore. But if you have been in this situation, don't underestimate how damaging it can be or has been. If you think you have been gaslit and you're already out of that situation, great. Maybe still worth talking to somebody about it. I'm just gonna say, because the long-term ramifications of this are so profound. I still to this day don't ever fully trust my memory in situations. I don't ever fully feel safe trusting my memory. I still to this day have to work at this stuff every single hour of every single day. This never completely goes away. Now I am in a safe, loving, healthy relationship where I can talk openly about all of this stuff with somebody who will validate my experiences, and that is super valuable to me. If I did not have that, I would probably be in long-term, consistent, permanent counseling, just to have somebody to bounce this stuff off of. Luckily, I am not in that position, and I am very self-aware and have done the work, but I don't want anybody to underestimate their experiences or underestimate how damaging this stuff is. You might have been in a relationship with somebody or lived with a roommate or had a friend that did this to you for just a few months. Don't minimize your experience. Think about the ways that it might have affected you and get the necessary support and help that you need. So with that, I am still, though, gonna finish this out with a reading or with a quick little card pull. I specifically intentionally chose the Universe Has Your Back by Gabrielle Bernstein because this is an affirmation deck. So it's not going to call us out on any crap. It's just going to say something nice to us. So that is how I wanted to close this one out. There is going to be a live chat discussion happening on my channel after a brief beverage refill. So remember to take the time to practice some self-care if that is what you need right now. You can skip the live chat. You don't have to engage with any of this stuff. But if you're going to be around, just please remember to keep it a safe space for everybody. Assume that the live chat is a walking, talking trigger warning, just like this video, because these topics are intense and they can present trauma triggers to people. So everybody, please do your normal thing. Keep it a safe space, because anybody who chooses to share about this topic deserves that much. And so with that, let's see what we get out of our deck. And thank you, by the way, for holding space for me in this video. It's tough to be this vulnerable on camera, and I knew it was going to be, but I also believe that this is a super important topic. So, and some of those stories I've never told in such a public way before. So there's that. All right, let's see what we've got. One last shuffle and a cut, and we'll pull our message. Hope is the conduit for miracles. No matter how rough of a time you're going through in your life, just know that things can always get better. And I know that sounds like one of those trite things that people say, but having been through my own really, really difficult experiences, I can tell you that it does happen. Things do get better. And they get better particularly when you reach out for the help that you need. There is no shame in getting any kind of help if you are in a situation like this. And not all the time will your friends and your personal acquaintances be the ones to best support you. If you're lucky enough to have that person or people in your life, fabulous. But if you're not, don't hold yourself back from getting the support that you need. And remember that the sun will always rise again the next morning. Thank you so much for hanging out with me with this. I'm wishing you all much, much love. Thank you so much for holding space for me, even just in watching this video. And I will talk to you all again very, very soon. Oh, wait, before I say goodbye, this one's so important. Our mantra, our Self-Worth Saturday mantra, and my personal mantra is, I am worthy and I am unafraid. So say that to yourself as often as possible. Bye, you guys.